right, and welcome to the Omnia Sol Art Show. Today, we are joined by t4mber rec4ll, who is a performative, generative, almost musician. Their music is something that sits between actual music and chaos. So for the artist, it supports unfolding interpretation. For the listener, it may deconstruct, discursive, and fix patterns of thinking by the way of fucking with musical space-time. So welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, it's nice to be here.
So you're, and also today we are glitching the movie Solar Babies,
Yes.
And we're also doing a collaborative music video project, which I hope to have finished by the time this episode comes out, so I can link it in the show notes of your. Is it an EP or album of Night?
Night, the Z1V11 pronounced Night is EP. Yeah, it's 5 songs.
Nice. So yeah, we got a collaborative project using Solar Babies, and so yeah, we wanted to, I guess, start with that. What was kind of what's your relationship with this movie, and kind of why did you want to see it glitch today?
It's funny you asked me what should we use, and I think before, I definitely have in the past, and even now I'm drawn to Cyberpunk and this idea of cyber, cyberspace and cyber utopia, dystopia, and there's a bunch of things from modern science fiction that I think are very interesting, and certain themes that I'm drawn to. But thinking about what influenced me as a kid, this movie definitely came to the top. It was the Buckaroo Banzai movie, and then in some ways Roger Rabbit and Howard the Duck. I don't know if you remember those films.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, Solar Babies, actually, that movie and Hackers really pushed me over the line into devoting a large portion of my adolescence to rollerblading. Because, in the Hackers rollerblade, and then in Solar Babies, it's just all about this rollerblading world, and so I think I really got enamored with that, but there was definitely this thing, there's this fighting against this I don't know, future dystopia that really resonated with me as a kid, and the idea that we could interact with a alien energy life form in a positive way, I think was really inspiring to me.
Yeah, it's really interesting aesthetically because you bring up Cyberpunk, and that's kind of the first thing I see when I see the aesthetic of the fashion, but then the actual setting kind of reminds me, more just even though a lot of times Cyberpunk is dystopian, this is almost more really dystopian, almost Mad Max level of just technological kind of deprivation almost. So then also, Howard the Duck, Roger Rabbit too, love it. Howard the Duck is always really funny to me, because since it's that's almost the first Marvel movie, since he is technically a Marvel character.
And that whole space pulled me into I really got into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the role-playing game and comics, and that whole animals as humans, or anthropomorphizing animals, I think is a really interesting idea for me. So I'm super into turtles. Watched the cartoon as a kid and got really into them, and then later read the comic books, and it's so different and so much darker than the TV show, and it's so interesting too, it being kind of directly inspired by Daredevil, to the point where instead of the hand, you have the foot, which is the foot.
So how did you get and this is actually Solar Baby's also the last thing I wanted to touch on. It's so good because the opening music too reminded me almost of like a Wendy Carlos score, like almost like Tron or one of those, like, you know, classical music but with synthesizers. And so I guess, yeah, to transition into talking about your music, how did you get kind of involved with like analog synthesizers, and what do you kind of say your like process is with that?
I'm kind of late to the game to it in some ways, like analog synthesizers. Like what people now think of modular synthesizers. I've used synthesizers for a really long time. And I played piano at a very young age. I played like classical piano for 5 years and got actually into improvising like very discordant, like spectral pieces before I eventually quit. But yeah, I mean, long ago I had like the original Chord Triton and different drum machines. But in terms of how I compose now, that was always in the computer for a really long time. And I think I really struggled with it. Any kind of computer music that I've made, you know, in the many years I've been working on music, I think maybe all the music I make is a little bit tortured, but some of it really was like kind of overworked and tortured, and I think it's because I struggled with screens and mouse and a mouse. Mm-hmm. And it was actually in 2019, after like giving up working with like virtual analog and modular instruments and like getting something underhand where the program was represented by patch cables and settings, and you know, there's this, I'm looking at it right now, you can't really see it, there's like a modular sitting on my desk, but it's like this box that like gets hot and like comes alive, like really has inspired a lot of the music that I make now. And I think part of my music, you know, I say my music is like cyber dub, and there's meaning to it, but the cyber piece is really about like trying to connect with technology in this like really utopian futuristic way. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's like modular synthesizers, and I've used a couple different things, but I'm primarily using Eurorack modular right now.
Interesting. Yeah, so, and some of the kind of, what is generative cyberdub?
So I make my version of, I think there's like many versions of generative, and there's a bunch of different ways of defining it, but my flavor of it is essentially setting up like a musical process that involves chaos and curating it. So setting up like some random melodies and bass lines and rhythm, and finding the things that are interesting and figuring out ways of kind of controlling it so that it like comes out and is like almost music. And that's where, like, you know, I really laugh at myself. Like, this whole idea of almost music comes from the SNL skit about Almost Pizza. I don't know if you've seen that. It's like,
I have,
makes me laugh every time. Yeah, so I, you know, create these generative processes and then try to like turn it into music. And there's a bunch of musical abstraction. There's a bunch of things I try to achieve through different abstractions. There's like musical goals, and mostly I'm trying to make dub music or hyperdub. And hyperdub is a record label, but for me it's like a genre of kind of this futuristic, frenetic kind of dub drum and bass music.
Yeah. That's awesome. The kind of curating the chaos, I feel like lends itself really well to the kind of art I've been making with this show too, because it's very much, you know, using since I'm using either analog or digital video synthesizers or like video processors like circuit benders. It's a lot of, you know, turning knobs to see what happens, and then, you know, finding a glitch that I like that I can like coast on for a while, and then switching it up if the image ever gets like too stale, and then afterwards, you know, taking it and curating it, and you know, cutting out the parts that's just like either I mean, this show in general gets pretty chaotic, but if it's just, you know, you turn too many knobs and it fades completely to black, like cutting out those parts, you know. And so I feel like that kind of is the same thing, where you have these sort of like almost like jam sessions in a way with the with your music, and then curating it after to kind of figure out what worked in the set. Do you do live performances too?
Yeah, that's a super interesting question that I was almost not wanting to answer or talk about, but it's like a core facet of like what I do. So the curation for me is live,
Okay.
and part of the like creating a patch or creating a piece of music is about assembling high level controls that allow you to orchestrate the arc of a song. But I have always been a live performer. I have done live performances going like way back. And it's not always been super intentional. But I mean, I didn't realize how much I like to perform live, and that's what I focus on until recently. And in the past couple of years, I've had the opportunity to perform a bunch in the Seattle area.
Mm-hmm.
There's like a huge community around electronic music, synthesizers, and modulars. There's like this modular Seattle collective and that puts on shows all the time, and I performed for them, and then I performed a bunch for this channel, a group of people called Basement State, and they've been like very gracious to have me on and perform. And I definitely am a live performer and an improviser, and in the modular setting I'm still learning about how to make that work, and like what is effective, like what not only sounds good, but like what are gestures that are meaningful in live performance. But that, like, it's just so interesting. Like there's a real tension around like live performing that I'm like kind of coming to understand more, and I'm kind of wondering if I should take a break for a little while to like reorganize. And I think there's just like, I think there's just more for me to like learn, to feel like I'm successfully kind of conveying what I want to do. And some of it is around just, I don't know, developing as an artist.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know if that was super clear. It's just like, it's funny, like when people go to hear like live electronic music, I feel like there's two camps, maybe three. Like you're going to hear something that you know, mm-hmm. and you want to like relate to it and experience an album or experience an aesthetic that you understand. Or you're going out to hear a function. You're going out for a function. I want to chill out with my friends, or I want to dance.
Yeah, I want to dance. I want to party. Yeah.
Get down.
I found that too with live performances too, because it's like with living in Chicago, juke music is so huge and house music, and so it's like a lot of shows I go to, it's almost like there's a lot of like blurred lines between what the kind of show is, but a lot of times it'll be like very dancing drum and bass type music, but then like mixing in of like harsh noise or very like innovative stuff. And it's interesting to see like DJ to DJ, because you'll have like songs that you'll recognize, not necessarily from them, but like as a standard like DJ set of like playing not necessarily hits, but like sometimes a song you'll recognize, or just like completely it's interesting. It's so different artist to artist, but
and that's actually the incredible power of DJing, is the ability to introduce the new in like the paradigm of like the understood, to expand people's boundaries. But just to talk about like the third dimension of music that I think people go to see, is to like push their boundaries. Mm-hmm. Like they go to see a big classical piece, or they go to see experimental electronic music, or they go to a noise show. And I've struggled, like the reason I like kind of struggling to talk about the live thing so much is that like I've struggled recently to kind of navigate all three of those boundaries, and those three of those kind of intentions, and be authentic. And it's just like a work in progress. But actually the thing that you brought up about like I think experimental music can be more palatable in like a dance setting or in a functional setting if it's like grounded in knowns. And I think that's accomplished through a variety of ways, like sampling or through melodic or harmonic motifs, and certainly something I'm thinking about using going forward. So
and then do you want to talk a little bit about because you have a new cassette with
James
your group?
Devane.
Holiday is the name of the group, and then the cassette, I just had it pulled up. 1,000 Airs. Do you want to talk about that project?
I would love to. So I've been making music with this longtime friend of mine, James Devane, going way back. It's almost been 20 years of making music together.
That's awesome.
Not certainly not full-time, like intermittently throughout the years. And then the cassette was done in collaboration with a local art collective called Electric Coffin, who are friends of mine, and it was part of their Nowhere Volume 4 exhibit, which explores like a deeper dimension of spirituality through technology. So at least for some of my normal, that vibe kind of fits with the intention of most of my music. But we've been collaborating for a little while on like what we call like our version of dub music, which I think sometimes comes out sounding like ambient or maybe dance music, or I don't really know if I can put a genre on what Holiday is. But we put a bunch of songs together and got this tape out and are like super excited about it. Got it professionally mastered by Nathan Moody, so it sounds good. And I guess it's available in a few places in Seattle right now, but we're largely just kind of putting it out through Bandcamp. And seeing if people vibe with it.
It looks, I'm definitely going to have to get a copy of it, because I was looking through the pictures just of the cassette, and it looks beautiful. Like I love the the cover, of course, but then also just the color of the cassette and the case.
Yeah.
With the, I'm a big fan of teal, but also that kind of what is the name of that kind of purplish in between purple and blue, like almost like an indigo?
Yeah, I think it's Indigo. So the tape was made by duplication.ca, and they're super great. On their site, it's a lavender, but it's like
lavender. That was honestly, I feel like lavender was the word I was looking for. It is, yeah.
Okay.
Lavender, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I'd be happy to send you a tape. So yeah, just send me your address.
What do you think is what's next for you as far as the music goes?
I'm not sure. This year, so it's like that first quarter of 2022 has been mostly about like integration. So seeing the release of music that's been made, and getting this cassette out. I've also been pretty busy with life, but had some time to kind of reorganize my studio. I'm actually been working towards adding a new level of abstraction to my music. So one of the core things that I do is I improvise with lines. Every song that I make comes from a single source of modulation. Like almost everything is driven from this line that like goes up and down or zigzag, or it looks like stair steps sometimes, or looks like a sinusoidal curve. But I'm working towards and that line tends to be generated on the fly. But I'm working towards creating song structures by building songs from patterns of line segments. And so that will allow me to like continue to like generate from use use other abstractions to generate from these lines, but actually create more long-lasting kind of compositions. And so I guess it's moving more towards like a song structure. But as much as I intend to make something that sounds like something in particular, it kind of always goes in another direction. So I'm trying to stay open to that. But yeah, for me, that'll be the focus of my process. I may perform a little bit, but I'm hoping to do most of my music kind of direct to YouTube for a little while.
As live streams or videos, or
as videos, yeah. So I'm trying to actually, and this is where like our conversation kind of started. I think we were talking about like collaborating on using music with some of your video. Mm-hmm. And I guess this is like an interesting like exit into like talking about glitch. And I just noticed that my music for me fits really well with like glitch visuals. And I think I have an understanding of why, but I'm not totally sure. Maybe it's because the music sounds glitchy. But I really, the format of my music as a YouTube video, I mean, that's like the most satisfying thing for me. There ends up being, the music kind of makes sense with crazy video.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I tend to think it's just because the mind, like where there are gaps in the music in terms of understanding, or like the mind is able to kind of jump, or your awareness is able to jump to the video and see a pattern that fits, that kind of makes the music make sense, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And just overall, it's just like kind of more satisfying for me. So yeah, I'm looking to do a bit more glitch video, and I've invested in some gear here that I haven't really totally deployed yet, but I'm mostly looking to like collaborate with people and just focus on the music.
Yeah, totally. And that's one thing that it honestly got me. This show got me back into making music because I had experimented with noise and then kind of electronic stuff, and this show actually made me kind of get into vaporwave because I've always really been fascinated by vaporwave and a fan of vaporwave. But it was honestly needing more music for my show that I was like, oh well, if I can't book an artist, like I don't feel like reaching out this week, like I'll just come up with a song to because I always want to have that kind of musical element on there, because this is now a talk show, but I always encourage people, if they don't want to hear me talk, just mute it and put on whatever music you want, because it very much is, the visuals do go so well like hand to hand with music. And I kind of see in the same boat of you saying your music matches with it. That's how I felt about like vaporwave, at least with the style that I'm doing, especially utilizing VHS tape, since it is this older technology now that most think of as like archaic, and the kind of like vaporwave of sampling and recycling and kind of deteriorating music. And yeah, I think part of it with your music, why it goes so well hand in hand with Glitch, definitely kind of goes back to how we were talking about just like cyberpunk aesthetics, that there's something, even though the technology behind synthesizers has been with us since, I don't even know what year they invented the synthesizer, but before modern computing, it's still just to this day sounds so futuristic, even though it is contemporary.
I totally agree. And what's so interesting with the VHS is like we start to really blur the lines between digital and analog, and for me there's something really magical in there. Like I think we tend to look at computers as these very cold, like unfeeling things. Like I realize our phones, like we're warming up to our phones, and like AI and GPT-3 are starting to like impress us quite a bit. But there's something about like quantization. There's something about taking the analog and like quantizing it to like a digital tape, or like applying digital effects, which happened a lot like in the 80s. That gives rise to like a certain kind of noise or aesthetic or like a vibe, and it's like really like attractive to me, and it's something I actually try to embody in my music. But yeah, I mean, it's also interesting too, like the modular synthesizer stuff. Like while I'm using some pretty fancy technology over here, I'm like kind of just going around the microphone and checking it out. It is like kind of vintage, like it is this like older aesthetic, and it's interesting that like this stuff is now kind of become more popular. But you mentioned vaporwave, and I'm like kicking myself because like I've been a record collector for a long time, and since I was in my late teens when I was collecting records, I've been collecting 80s and 90s movie soundtracks on vinyl. And
that's incredible.
I think I had 100 records, and I'd always planned to like sample them and like slow them down. And I did that for a little while and I never finished. But I think a couple years ago, I got sick of them and I got rid of most of them. And I wish I had them now, because like there's some like interstitial music for like 80s music for 80s movies that is like solid gold.